It just takes a moment. Okay, it looks as though we are live on YouTube. So welcome everyone. Tonight is Wednesday, February 21st, 6 p.m. We're having a virtual Scarborough Housing Alliance meeting. Because the first order of business is election of officers, I will facilitate the meeting to get through agenda item 2 and then pleased to hand it off. So first order of business would be roll call. It looks as though we have all but Marjorie DeSantis here. So we certainly have a quorum. Let's move on to item number 2, election of officers. I guess what I'd entertain is someone to nominate someone to serve as, well, first we should have some discussion. I was looking to work through chairmanship and secretary. That's traditionally what this group has used. It's worth a discussion if you wish to have other officers as well. We could do that as well. Do you want to have some discussion around just chairman and secretary as the officers?
Sure. I mean, that seems to have worked for us historically. Go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's worked really well in the past in terms of having a chair and then somebody to keep meeting minutes. I know we're also fairly limited in numbers on the committee too.
Okay. So with that, then
Tom, the only question I would have is, in the event that the chair is not available, who runs the meeting? So I don't know if it'd be helpful to have a vice chair.
It always is for exactly that reason, Brian. Traditionally, we have not, but and it's not been a problem. But that's not to say I'm certainly pleased to do that. That's very commonplace. So, if I'll do it this by kind of consensus or without objection, we'll look to nominate and fill 3 officer seats: chair, vice chair, and secretary.
Great.
Yes.
Okay. So let's start with chair. I'm willing to accept nominations for anyone.
I'm new to the game, so I would say, I don't know, Brian or Will or Eric. I mean, Brian seems to be, I guess more on top of it. So I'd like to throw Brian.
All right. I'll accept Brian Shumway as a nomination for chair of the Scarborough Housing Alliance. Any other nominations? If not, we'll have a vote. We'll need to do a roll call. Dick?
Brian, yes.
Bill?
Aye.
Michaela?
Yes.
Brian?
Yeah.
Present.
I'm going to record that as a yes vote.
Yes, a yes vote. Yeah.
Eric?
Yes.
And Will?
Yes.
It is unanimous, Mr. Chairman. Congratulations. I'll turn it over to you.
Oh,
Brian?
terrific.
Did we sneak up on you, or has there been some discussion?
No, this is welcome. Not much discussion, but I look forward to serving as chair again, Bill.
Good. That's perfect. Just so long as we weren't sandbagging you.
No, when a nomination was made, I didn't want to give him much time for objection. So
yeah, no, I appreciate the consideration, Bill.
Thank you for doing it, Brian. It's much appreciated.
Yeah, my pleasure. Dick, I owe you one, huh?
What you do?
Right. Yeah, so moving to vice chair, is there a nomination or an expression of interest from somebody to serve as vice chair?
Eric, Will, are either of you interested?
Nobody's saying anything.
I mean, I'm happy to do it. I don't think there's much to it other than, so I'd be happy to do it. We haven't had it historically, and it's only, fill and roll. So sure.
Well,
and just for what it's worth, I did hear from Marge. She would be willing to accept that position. She just didn't want to commit to chairman again, if that helps you at all.
Oh, I nominate Marge then.
He's not here, so.
I was going to nominate her for secretary.
That's a good idea, Eric.
Good one, Eric.
I nominate Eric for vice chair then.
Well, I think your nomination was fine. I'm good with that.
Oh. I was only doing it so I wouldn't end up as secretary.
So is that Eric as the sole nominee for vice chair?
No, I think it's Will as the sole nominee.
Will is the sole nominee. Okay, all right. With no secretary, it's hard to keep track. So thank you. All right. Any other nominees for vice chair? All right. We'll then close the nomination process. And Will, do you have a speech for your candidacy?
I wasn't terribly well prepared, but
Got to vote first.
yeah.
Perfect. Great.
Yeah, we
So,
do need roll call vote if you could, please.
Sure. Dick,
Yes, for Will.
Bill,
Yes.
Eric, Eric.
Yeah, sorry, Brian, you can't see me. Yes.
All right, great. Thanks. Michaela,
Yes.
Will,
Yes.
great. And I also vote yes. And I think is
That's it.
that everybody?
Yes.
Great. All right, wonderful. Terrific. And then the third slot is for the secretary.
I
Any
nominate Marge.
nominations for secretary?
Is that for keeping the minutes?
It is.
Anybody want to do that?
Not particularly.
Eric's got some experience, right?
3 years.
Eric, would it be friendly if I nominated you?
I would feel badly to nominate Marge.
Yeah, I know the absent person is that rule. Don't
That's
show up
too
at the
easy.
meeting.
Tom, if she expressed interest in vice chair, did she also express similar willingness?
I do not recall an expression of interest in secretary, no.
Eric, do you accept the nomination?
Yeah, I'm fine for another year.
All right.
All right.
You're a good man, Eric.
Very good man.
Thank you.
Would anybody else like to make a nomination for a potential secretary? All right, hearing none, we'll close the nominations and do a roll call vote. Assuming, Eric, that you don't have a candidacy speech for us to consider.
I do not. I'll put it in the
Okay.
minutes.
All right. Dick,
Yes.
Bill,
Yes.
Will,
Yes.
Michaela,
Yes.
Eric,
Yes.
I vote yes. So that is unanimous.
You got a strong new team.
Great. This is terrific. Unanimously voted. That's wonderful. Great. So that's election of the officers. That's item 2 on the agenda. Moving on to item 3, which is approval of the minutes from our January 13th meeting. Tody emailed around the minutes on Friday, and folks got a chance to look at them.
Yes.
Anybody like to make a motion to approve them?
I move that we approve the minutes.
Second.
Great. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor of approving the minutes?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Great. It's unanimous. The minutes are approved. Terrific. So now we've got some new business. And so the first item on the agenda is the proposal from Avesta for the new affordable senior housing project at the former public safety building. And Tom, do we have a guest speaker to talk about this?
do. I'm just now bringing Nate Howes into the conversation. Nate, can you hear us? There he is.
Hey, everyone.
Good evening.
And Nate,
Just by way of background, Nate spent about an hour and a half of quality time with Betsy and I just a short bit ago. Nate made a similar presentation to the Finance Committee. Slightly different, but certainly a lot of the same subject matter. So he's here to, I think, serve a couple of purposes. One, to kind of introduce himself in Avesta, and also introduce, in particular, the project that they are considering or proposing here in Scarborough, and perhaps make a request of the Alliance going forward. So with that, Nate.
Sounds good. All right, so I'm going to share my screen just so you guys have a background to look at while I give an intro. Hold on 1 second. All right, you guys all see that?
Yep.
Okay. All right, so hello everyone, my name is Nate Howes. I'm a development officer with Avesta Housing. First, a little bit about myself. I've been at Avesta now for around 2 years. Before Avesta, I was at Maine Housing. I started there as a multifamily underwriter for their tax credit program. And in my tenure, I moved my way up to tax credit administrator. In my role as tax credit administrator, I actually ran the scoring process for the tax credit awards in 2018 and the Housing Trust Fund program. I therefore have a very good idea of how Maine Housing's programs function and what reviewers of these applications look for in a successful application. So this project that you're seeing on your screen is perhaps best understood as a vision for community space and communal senior living. The Avesta building would provide, the Avesta building, which is this building, would provide 31 units of affordable 55 plus senior housing with 31 bedroom units and 1 efficiency apartment. Directly across the parking lot, connected by some nice pavers, we see that we have a gym in this building, along with a potential grocery store and hopefully a future bank. I think we all know, especially this committee in particular, with your focus on housing, how important it is for seniors to have ready access to activities that are important to daily living. Some of our senior residents don't have cars anymore or choose not to drive, so this proximity is incredibly important. It allows seniors to age in place in a community in which they potentially grew up, and really fosters a sense of community here, especially with the closeness of the amenities, proximity to public transport up here, about a half mile up the road, and some potential on-site demand transportation. So further bolstering this sense of community, we will have a community room on the 2nd floor of the police and fire stations that will be available for booking by our residents. In addition, we plan to offer access to this community space to members of the Scarborough community at large. We frequently partner with local organizations here in Portland, and they are able to use our community space, in particular at 409 Cumberland Avenue and Unity at Bayside. We have large community rooms in those places. In particular, we have a large kitchen facility at the 409 Cumberland building, which cooking classes are sometimes actually held there. Of course, this is all pre-COVID. So when complete, when you think about the project as a whole, I just encourage you to think about the vision for the campus. We have this 31 units of senior housing directly across the street in a well-landscaped neighborhood almost. The trees around it really create a neighborhood type feel. Directly across the lot, we have a gym, we have potential grocery, a bank. There are really immediate needs that can be met just by the site itself, not to mention what's across the street. Now, getting into my request here. So as you all know, affordable housing developments is quite challenging. There are limited pools of resources in a small state like Maine, and that's why Scarborough actually presents quite a unique opportunity for development. Scarborough is one of the few municipalities that actually has a pool of resources dedicated for affordable housing development specifically. In Portland, there are ordinances that support this. Portland has its own allocation of housing trust fund and home money from HUD. But outside of Scarborough, there are perhaps just 4 other participating jurisdictions that receive Fed home money from housing and urban development. That's really the outside capital besides Maine Housing. So a typical development like this requires that we cobble together many different sources, sometimes with seemingly contradictory terms and restrictions, and other financing mechanisms beyond just capital. And so to that end, I just made my presentation to the Town of Scarborough's Finance Committee in my request for a credit enhancement agreement. As I noted in front of the Finance Committee, the credit enhancement agreement serves a dual purpose. It not only makes this development financially viable, but it further bolsters our application to Maine Housing this fall. Maine Housing values credit enhancement agreements around the one I've requested from the town is 75% for 20 years. And Maine Housing values that 3 points on a 97-point scale. Now that doesn't sound like too much, but the top scoring projects each year are really only separated by one or 2 points. So every point matters, and this credit enhancement agreement gets us back to that 74 range out of 97, which is what the lowest scoring application received last year. So that's the request I've made for them, and I wanted you guys to be aware of that. So our request to the Housing Alliance is in keeping with that spirit. Affordable housing development is tough. It requires us to cobble together many different resources, financing mechanisms like TIFs or credit enhancement agreements. And really the money that we're requesting from the town of Scarborough, the $200,000, is really just closing that small sources and uses gap we have when we account for the potential TIF from the town and other financing sources. So with that being said, let's go to the project, and I will kind of take you around the site.
Do you think, Nate, we could ask some questions before we go into that? Just
yeah,
about
absolutely.
yeah,
go for it.
Could you just repeat what you were saying around well, I guess the question is there a scoring benefit to the funding allocation?
There would also, so there's a scoring benefit to the credit enhancement agreement, and there's a further scoring benefit to the capital allocation. Maine Housing values below market capital in their applications, submitted applications, excuse me. So what they do is they will look at a loan, say $200,000, and then they will discount that according to the 30-year treasury plus 300 basis points. So they'll basically bring that money into present dollar terms and compare that with, say, their 0% money. So a $200,000 allocation from the town of Scarborough would actually be something like $160,000 in present value terms, because they want to see how much that money really is in 30 years if it's a 0% deferred loan. So I know that's a little bit too complex for this call, but it would get us about a point in below market capital.
And then the other question that I had was, are you saying that Scarborough did you say something about Fed housing money that Scarborough was eligible, or you were saying that,
no,
that there are jurisdictions that?
I was just comparing Scarborough as being a unique entity, really. I mean, this is one of the first towns that I've seen in Maine where you guys have a fund that's dedicated to this, outside of Portland, who has their own housing trust fund program, which they fund through fees that are levied on hotel developers. The other jurisdictions like Auburn, Lewiston, Cumberland County, they receive their money directly from HUD. So HUD allocates money to Maine Housing and those other three, what they call participating jurisdictions. And they allocate money every year. The pot for those is usually around $300,000 to $400,000. Scarborough is one of the few towns outside of federal financing that I've seen actually offer affordable housing capital like this.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions before I move to the site? Yep, Brian.
Nate, before we get into the site discussion, just kind of globally, are the two things that you'll be asking us for tonight, am I reading right? It's essentially going to be a letter of support from the Alliance to Town Council in support of your ask on the CEA. And
Exactly.
then ultimately, are you also looking for some guidance on how to apply for this money for this $200,000? Okay.
Yes, I would. Yes, I would like your advocacy and the assistance with the application.
All right, great. Thanks.
Brian, could I make a quick comment?
Sure. That's it.
So this is like the second time that we've met with Nate and the developer Jack Soley. So just a little town background. You know, this was the sale of the PSB, and I'm sure everyone on this call knows that, but just for anyone listening in or somebody who might have missed it, this is the sale of the public safety building old property, and it was a part of a referendum that funded by bond the new public safety building less the amount of selling the old property. And so that property was bought by a developer named Jack Soley, who had planned to put some retail space, perhaps restaurants, and a small, I don't know how small, but housing that he was going to do as workforce housing with no CEA or town money requested. And that was the initial request. And then COVID hit, and he requested, or someone requested us, I think the developer, but we got requested by the town manager if we would extend the contract, the time that the developer had to buy the property. And so under the extraordinary circumstances, we did extend the time the developer had to close on the property, which was August. And so at that point, you know, we were, you know, hoping everything was still going forward, you know, the way that it had been proposed, and kind of under, you know, there was no guarantee, but the way that the property had been sold. And so it was after that last month that this kind of new plan came forward with the developer working with and selling a piece of the property to Avesta. So just kind of wanted to give that background, because the initial sale of this was and development was going to be a little bit different, although it was still housing, and you know, so kind of it's more like a financing thing almost than what's going to end up there. But
Yeah, Betsy, thank you for that background. That's helpful to understand the lens that town council will probably be looking at this through as you're looking at the proposal. So thank you.
Can I ask one question on that? Did the sale get completed? Was it
yes,
extended?
sale did get completed in August to the extended deadline that we were, and I believe the developer had put down a deposit that to go through the extension, they had paid a deposit and then closed on the property. I don't know the physical date, but it closed, you know, Tom did the whole deal and he can speak to it, but you know, I thought the extension was great. I thought Tom did a great job doing that because it was such uncertain times. We really didn't know if it was going to go at all at that point. So.
Thank you.
Great. Yeah, so Nate, if you could get into just some background on the project, and you know, I think to the extent it's already in your description, this will be great, but maybe after the meeting you can add to it. But you know, sharing with us some of what you know about the demand for this housing, as well as you know what your plans are for meeting that demand will really help us understand whether this is meeting a true need in Scarborough, and will help us be able to support it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So just to talk about, so Finance Committee has already requested some financial models as well, in addition to market data. So I'm happy to provide that to you guys as well.
Great, thank you.
Totally understand that you guys want to see the demand. I can tell you that in the Portland market, so the market analysts look at the primary market area. In this case, the primary market area would be Greater Portland. There's a set of maybe like 8 towns they consider. Capture rates, which is the number of people eligible divided by the number of units, are typically less than 1%, maybe less than 2%. So a 31 unit development would have, you know, multiply that by 100%. So it's like 3,000 people who would qualify. That's just a typical capture rate we see in Portland. But yeah, I'm happy to provide you those specific market analysis.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions before I get into the site? No. Okay. All right. So this is part of the Soley and Hebert portion of the site. They are hoping to engage a grocer here. Then we see the site as it currently is. So this is where the grocer would be. This is the old police station, and this is our site, our portion of the site, which is now just a vacant lot. So here is the site plan that you all saw when I was talking. We have here what would be the grocery. On the second floor, we have some office space. For another tenant over here, Jack has already gotten an execute LOI for a local gym. I can't remember the name of that gym. But we think that's a great pairing with our 55 plus population. And we have had early conversations with Tim and the gym owner about extending some kind of group packaging or group class offers between the two, between our housing and between the gym. This green space right here is hopefully destined to become a future banking branch, which again just brings that amenity that much closer to the seniors. There's the site plan with the bank. Here is a first floor plan of our development. You can see we have all 1-bedroom units with a single studio off here. We have a mechanical room, laundry, and a office. We always like to keep resident service coordinator close by to help our tenants. The other thing I mentioned in my my opening was we're going to be leasing some space from Jack and Tim up here, about 700 square feet for community room. And that community room, like I said, will be available not only to our residents, but also available to the town of Scarborough organizations at large. We already do that. As I said, we already do that in Portland. So we're prepared to do that. Beyond that, there's not much to talk about regarding the building. As you can see, it's 3 stories. This is pretty much one of the more recent renderings I have. Here's another one from the side. It's we've angled the roofs to assist with our solar panels that we do plan to put on the roof. That's another thing I should talk about is that with Avesta, we have our own set of design standards. We're designing these buildings not just for 15 years, not just for 10 years. We're designing them for the long run, 30 years. We have a set of standards that exceed local code requirements. We're doing Energy Star lighting, Energy Star fixtures, insulation on the walls that exceeds code, which code is around R20, R24, which is just the measure of how quickly heat goes from the outside to the inside. In this case, we would probably have an R value of R35, R30. And that's just because we view our operational data on a very detailed scale. We like to make sure that our buildings are performing at their peak, and we like to reduce operational costs. And that's just part of how we operate. The other thing we like to do in our developments is have makeup air. Air quality is so important. And so we will have, ERV type system in this building. So the whole site is meant to be, a campus, a green campus. Not only the layout being surrounded by trees, but the buildings themselves are meant to have green features. And that's really the focus. Sustainability. Any more questions?
Thanks for that overview, Nate.
Yeah, absolutely.
Any questions from folks in the Alliance or from Betsy? Will?
Have you looked at, do you have projections around, the number of residents, like based on data that would still have vehicles?
Yeah, okay, so good points. So projections on number of residents, I can get that for you, but I can tell you that it's probably going to be 31 to 35, just based on, most of these are going to be single people. That's just what the average breakdown comes to across our senior properties. As to parking, we have a pretty good metric at Avesta where we say for senior properties, it's 0.7 spaces to every unit. And that's actually a bit of a hedge. I have 2 properties right now in the Cumberland County, one in Gray and then one in Gorham. And both of those, one in Gorham was approved with a 0.7. But the parking there is actually utilized at about 50%. And that's the same with Gray. So typically half the units would have cars. So 15 cars is what I would expect for this development. The total lots has 77 spaces, I believe. Over 70. And we only really need 15. Well, 15 is half, but we're allocating 22, it's 0.7. And we feel that's more than sufficient.
Nate, it's probably worth noting that you have appeared before the planning board with
Yes.
this sketch plan. And you've also
Yes.
engaged the neighborhood with this plan in particular?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Tom. So we had a neighborhood meeting last Thursday. We had approximately 8 neighbors attend, I believe. We are working through some of their concerns on the building facade and appearance. There were some concerns noted about that, and so we're working through those. One of the other concerns was about parking, and I believe we were able to alleviate those concerns. We then appeared in front of the planning board on Monday, the 22nd, so this past Monday. And the planning board asked us also to look at, the facade and how the building looks. They had some concerns about parking, but I do believe we successfully alleviated those concerns. Again, the 0.7 calculation for Vesta is key there, along with some overflow parking. I believe there's some overflow parking up here. And then the main thrust of the conversation was about traffic patterns. We were asked, so they didn't take a vote on the site plan and subdivision. That was tabled until March, and we're going back before them in March with our changes that we've made on their suggestion. So just to give you guys a recap really quick. So neighborhood meeting last Thursday, planning board this Monday. I appeared in front of finance committee about an hour and a half ago, 2 hours ago. And we had a workshop with the town council 2 weeks ago, I think, Tom. So that's kind of where we are right now. So planning board ongoing, approvals hopefully April. And then, town council action, we're going through the TIF process that the town council set up for economic development TIFs, even though it doesn't necessarily quite mesh with exactly with an affordable housing TIF. But because the district exists, and the TIF policy was new, I ran through those, the scoring calculations there. So I'll be going back before the finance committee and potentially, I guess, back before you guys once I have some market analytics data, the performa, and Betsy had also requested I follow up on one item regarding our property management and them looking in on residents on an annual basis, checking to see how they're doing on aging in place.
Great. Thanks, Nate. Dick, any questions from you?
None from me.
No. Michaela, how about you?
No, I can't think of any questions. It was a good presentation there.
Yeah.
Great. Bill, how about from you?
Yeah, I was wondering if
Oh,
Oh, that's going to lost them.
Rose.
Uh-oh.
I had another question,
Oh.
Brian.
There he is.
Hey, Bill, could you start your question again?
yeah, okay, I'll start it again. Often, visuals of the building don't tell you exactly what it's going to look like when you actually see it. Is there, I've seen several of your projects in Portland, West End, Cumberland Avenue, and would any of those be a reflection of the architecture?
I don't know. I think the best visual I can give you is actually one of Jack's projects in Portland. It's kind of, sorry, I know I'm flipping around here. So one of Jack's projects in Portland, it kind of looks like that. You have this wood at the bottom and then clapboard going up. Our roof isn't like, these are bump outs that Jack put in, pop-ups rather, that Jack put in for his market rate tenants. And this was affordable housing as well, but he had some market in there. And then we have a different roof than this. Our roof is like this. So this isn't even a rendering. There's not much here. This is really just a massing photo. So this is not, I don't want you to think that this is exactly what it's going to look like. If we go back to the closer image, you can kind of see the clapboard there. And so the slanted roofs are meant to serve as a transitional housing, transitional, because if you, the buildings directly behind this building are your typical single family homes with gable roofs and whatnot. So we're trying to be respectful of that while also offering a transition from this Route 1 corridor to residential family.
Did you, how receptive was the neighborhood to your design?
There was concern about, there was concern from two neighbors about the height of the building, but the height is currently allowed in the zoning. And Jack and Tim have pointed out that if this was a strictly market rate property, they'd have to have more parking. But because of Avesta's 0.7 need, they don't have to have more parking, and they would have to raise the building by a floor to accommodate under the building parking. So I think that was a pretty well-received answer. The bigger concern tended to be just how plain it looks right now, and it does. But that's because it's not a true rendering. It's just a massing photograph meant for site plan and subdivision. So we're taking their concerns into account, and the planning board chair did ask that we attempt to make some modifications to it, and so we're working through those.
Good, thank you.
Absolutely.
Thanks. Will, did you have a question?
I did, but Betsy's had her hand up. I don't know if you want to.
Well, I just wondered if you have any parking information about the whole site, Nate, because I mean, we've had some trouble in town, and I guess I'll take the concerns of planning board, but I hear what you're saying with parking, but you know, we have a Starbucks and a bank together across on Route 1 in Hannaford, and before COVID, you couldn't park in there to go in Starbucks. And then we have a restaurant that has, you know, a similar issue. And I know, Brian, you're at Foley's, and I know, you know, there was some encouragement to get Foley's to have less parking, and he kept fighting back, saying no. And I think, you know, and when times return to normal, it's concerning. Tom, is there parking across that street? Not Route 1, but
Fairfield.
is that town
Fairfield.
property or parking next to Amato's where overflow parking could go, or?
Yes, the parking lot shown at the top of this this picture here, there's one white vehicle shown there.
Yep.
I can be more clear, I can provide you the deed, but that is public parking. For all intents and purposes, it appears and is used as though, you know, it's Amato's. One thing that I do intend to do is to put proper signage up. They don't have any exclusive use to it, so that is generally public parking. And I should note, we came into possession of that property through a governor's deed that has a very clear reversion that if it's ever used for anything other than public parking, it reverts back to the state. So that's very clear, and I think we need to have signage to indicate that going forward.
Okay. Thank you. And I didn't let you answer the question, Nate. Did you have?
That's okay. No, that's okay. Yeah, so that
Sorry.
overflow is what helps us hedge against any parking overages. But I think that the planning board did have some questions about parking. I do think we were able to alleviate those concerns, but I also think that we perhaps offered to get into more detail about it. So again, that's something that I'm happy to dig down into and provide beyond just the Avesta lot.
One thing I would note, and we're getting into some of the details, the planning board, you know, is well versed
Yeah,
and
sorry about
capable
that.
of. But one of the great things about this plan is that they're really reducing the curb cuts. Nate, if you can go back to the Google image of existing condition, you'll see that the whole driveway apron, essentially the length and width of the building is one continuous curb cut. And I guess that was to accommodate emergency vehicles coming and going. As we all know, driving this stretch of Route 1, that's a challenging section. And so reducing that down to a single kind of almost residential scale, it's probably not residential, but a much smaller specific curb cut is going to be a huge improvement. The same is true on Fairfield by eliminating what now are kind of three very large openings into one. You know, from a traffic management point of view and a safety point of view, that's going to be a vast improvement.
And you know, Nate, as we're asking some of these maybe planning oriented questions, I do want to be conscious that we are the Housing Alliance, right? So we're here to really weigh in on the the merits of this proposal as it relates to affordable housing. But you know, clearly one of the concerns is how affordable housing presents itself in the community. And so I think, you know, that's the spirit with which I think we're asking some of these tangential questions. And so I hope you'll take it in that spirit as a way to improve the way that this proposal can fit within the community.
I totally understand that. When, you know, if it's done poorly, then everyone gets a bad perception of the housing, and it's so important, especially for Maine. We want people to be welcoming affordable housing into their communities and not worried about what's going to happen. So I understand.
Also, yeah, I appreciate that openness. Will, do you
Yes.
have another question?
I do. Yep. So Nate, I'm just hoping you can comment on this, or it's really, I guess it's a question. The last several projects that have come before us have also been similarly restricted to residents of a certain age and above. And I'm just curious, is there a scoring advantage to having age restricted housing versus kind of unrestricted family housing as well? Not that it would necessarily fit this site well, but really curious about that.
So that is a great question, Will, and Betsy. You've heard this before, you too, Tom. So I'm probably going to be repeating myself too. The Finance Committee had the exact same question, so did the larger council. That's the thing, is everyone wants to know, well, why are people doing affordable housing? So I will say that the QAP and Maine Housing Financing, as it currently is written, incentivizes the development of senior housing. It's not an explicit bias. It's implicit and unintentional. So to get a competitive score for a workforce housing development, the majority of your units, greater than 50% of the total units, must be larger than 2 bedrooms. So this makes developments more difficult from a financial perspective and critically from a zoning perspective. Like 2-bedroom units, not possible in this zone. You know, units over, I think it's 700 square feet, we don't, not possible. So there are fewer sites and resources for the larger projects like this. It takes up more square footage. In addition, as you get into larger units, the tax credit rents don't cover the cost of actually constructing the units. In essence, the amount that you can borrow each subsequent larger unit is smaller relative to the cost of actually constructing that extra square footage. Basically, the rent differential between a 1-bedroom unit and a 2-bedroom unit, or a 3-bedroom unit and a 1-bedroom unit, isn't sufficient to cover the cost. So meanwhile, senior housing with a focus on 1-bedrooms is much more feasible. Maine Housing implicitly incentivizes the development of senior housing by offering an additional 6 points for additional accessible units beyond those required by law. So we can readily include these accessible features in a development much more than we could, say, construct larger 2- or 3-bedroom units. The cost difference from a square footage basis is stark. You know, making a unit accessible is as potentially easy and less costly than, you know, putting on a whole nother bedroom. Like, you're cutting out the sink potentially for people's wheelchairs. You're adding grab bars in the bathroom and the shower. You're doing an ADA shower, a roll-in shower. These are much easier. So from a strictly cost basis, these are easier changes to make than actually building the 2-bedroom. So these 6 points that we get for senior housing are a 1-to-1 offset with the 6 points that Maine Housing offers on workforce housing for larger units. So if you're not getting those 6 points for larger units in in family or workforce housing, you're not competitive. And it should be said that not all workforce housing can or should be developments with larger units. Sometimes what municipalities really want is a 1-bedroom unit in a downtown location for young working professionals. However, such proposals don't score and aren't funded through the competitive 9% program. They just can't compete. You really have to maximize your points in every single category. And I actually know of 2 such developments that didn't score in the 2019 QAP because they were focused on 1-bedroom workforce housing. One was in Portland and one was in Auburn. So that's why. I hope that wasn't too complex of an answer. It's twofold. It's financial and it's implicitly incentivized.
Terrific. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Absolutely.
Eric, do you have any questions that you want to pose?
No, thank you, Brian. I'm familiar with it.
Yeah, and Betsy just heard that speech, so thanks for hanging in there, Betsy.
Eric, sorry, I lost you there. Any other questions? Anything from you, Eric?
No, thank you, Brian. And for full disclosure to the remaining Alliance members and others, I'm a Vesta employee. So I'm familiar with this project.
Great. All right, so I'm going to scroll around my little iPhone here, and if anybody else has a comment or a question, maybe just like raise your hand.
Brian, are you planning
Otherwise-
are you planning to do like a discussion? I guess I was reserving for questions for Nate. I don't have any more questions for Nate at this point.
Yeah, all right. Terrific. Well, Nate, thank you. Thank you for your presentation. And yeah, Will, I think now's the time to kind of open it up and kind of bearing in mind that ultimately what Nate's hoping for from the Alliance will be, one, a letter of support to town council in support of the CEA request. That I would imagine would be rooted in the merits of the proposal, on the basis of its meeting the affordable housing needs of town, and then two, some guidance and ultimately a funding approval, I imagine, for a request from the housing trust fund that we act as kind of the initial gatekeepers from. And Nate, to that end, on the funding piece, I think Tom can largely walk you through the mechanics of how to apply, and there will be a response to an RFQ or RFP that we've got outstanding that is answering a series of questions that we will then consider, and probably largely have you come in and do a scaled down presentation of what you've already done and answer a few questions. And but
totally
I think
fine.
largely Tom can take care of that offline. But yeah, Will, why don't we kick off kind of the Alliance conversation now about what stands between us today and a decision to either support or not support.
Okay.
Yeah, with what I would say is an assumption that we'll probably want to be asking for some more information before we make an ultimate support decision.
Yeah, very, very fair. I guess my additional question was for Tom. I was wondering if he could speak to both the current balance that's in the fund, committed funds out of there, and also just for background, because we have some new members, if you could talk a little bit about where the fund comes from, if you wouldn't mind.
Certainly, as many of the Alliance members are aware, you've been very integral in this formation of this program. We do have an option for developers to make payments in lieu payments, if you will, into this fund rather than actually providing affordable housing as part of their developments. That's done in a number of ways. Most recently, it's been done through either density bonuses. So developers are able to build at a higher density in exchange for payments into this fund. And we've actually had some of our best success negotiating payments as part of contract zone approvals. The Beacon apartment project is one, and more recently was Piper Shores. Those two projects account for about $450,000 of funding into this fund. And just by way of background for new members and perhaps the public, it took us, I think it took the Alliance some time to understand kind of the value of leveraging, creating this fund, and kind of the multiples of units that are produced as a result by leveraging other funds as opposed to forcing developers to build 10% of the units perhaps. The best case in point there would be Piper Shores. If they were held to that standard, they would have produced something in the order of 6 units. In exchange, they're paying $250,000 in lieu fees that will undoubtedly leverage, many more units than just 6. So that's kind of a long-winded answer to one of your questions, which is kind of where does this fund come from and what purpose does it serve? The current balance of the fund is $477,172. We have committed $200,000 to Jocelyn Park Place, and we've not made that payment. So effectively, we should be looking at $277,173. And we're within weeks, or a month at most, of receiving another $250 from Piper Shores that's payable upon permit at permit time. They are mobilized on site and doing site work, so it's imminent. So by my math, we have just over 525,000 in the account.
Can I follow up before we move on? So we paid out to Bessie, is fully paid out.
Yep.
And then Jocelyn is contingent on scoring, on also receiving funds from the main
Correct.
PPP.
So,
Yep.
But we should consider it committed at this point.
Yeah. Would this application be part of the same, like, are we putting forward two projects that are competing against each other now, or is one kind of further along?
I think it's a different funding cycle. Jocelyn Place, as I understand, is in the current queue. If they're not unsuccessful, it's quite possible they might be competing, frankly. Nate and others, I would refer to you about the likelihood of that.
Yeah, so Jocelyn Place, my understanding, actually, Betsy, I think it was Betsy, revealed some new info in the finance committee. They got the AHP grant, and I think they're using, sorry, for those who aren't aware, Federal Home Loan Bank of Boston is yet another pot of money that affordable housing developers use. They have an affordable housing program. Under that program, they offer direct capital in the form of, it's usually around a $650,000 award, and they also offer below market financing. So it sounds like Brooks was able to secure that money, and I think he has a path forward now. So it sounds like he is at least one full cycle ahead of us.
Great. Yeah, and Nate, I think what our intention will be is, when you do make application for this money, I would expect that we would have a fairly full conversation that, we'll deal with, another re-upping about, what this fund is all about and what the balance is and whatnot. I wonder if there's some more conversation around the support of the CEA, though, if we could focus in on that, as kind of an initial step with this project.
Sure. Yeah, I'm happy to talk about that. We were requesting a 75% TIF for a 20-year period, not only for the points, but this 3 points would get us up to a 74 on a 97-point scale. The lowest funded application last time was a 74. In addition, though, what a credit enhancement agreement allows us to do is it essentially allows us to borrow more money from Maine Housing or more money from the Federal Home Loan Bank of Boston. That's 75% over 20 years would, allow us. I haven't had a chance to do the calculations. This was a request from the finance committee as well, but I believe the numbers are around $1.5 million in additional debt, and that additional debt that we borrow directly finances this development. That's really what the CEA is allowing us to do. It's financial feasibility and it's programmatic viability in Maine Housing's competitive financing round.
And Nate, could you speak a little bit about your timing? If, and what I'm getting at there is, if you want to be making application on such and such a date in order to have both of these pieces in place, when would you need to be hearing from us on each piece?
So I don't, sooner is always better, but I like to be ahead of this. I like to be ahead of schedule. So the applications are due end of August. Credit enhancement agreements have to be into Maine Housing for review 45 days prior. So that puts us in mid-July. In terms of below market capital, so say that we got the credit enhancement agreement. As long as we get that by say early July, end of June, that's good. For below market capital, you guys could award it to us the day before we submit our application, and we could still put it in there. We would need a letter signed by you guys, but we could put it in our application. Yeah. That's the lead time we're dealing with here. I want to apply August 23rd, I think it is. The bigger lead time items that, as planning board, we have to have those approvals in also 45 days prior to application because that's when the appeal period expires. So everything's like mid-July is for the CEA and for planning board. The capital can be later.
And then Nate, just to be clear, you're looking for a letter from us to town council for some decision that they're going to make. When if you're if it's your ideal world, when is your presentation to town council for their decision, and when would our letter need to be in front of them to consider for their decision?
Well, so that's a good question, and I guess I will have to defer. I'm going to answer, and I'll defer to Tom then for the timing specifically. So I have some follow-up items for the finance committee, and sounds like some follow-up items for you, which is great. The two overlap, so that's fine. So it's just a question of me following up on the finance committee items and getting back in front of the committee to answer their questions. So I don't know when the next finance committee meeting is, but I expect I would then, after finance committee, they would either make a recommendation, yay or nay, to the town council. I expect that would happen at a following meeting, but you can correct me if I'm wrong, Tom.
No, that's fair. If the finance committee follows its normal meeting cycle, I wouldn't expect it would be in front of council until April at the earliest.
Okay.
Frankly.
Great. Well, Nate, I'll tell you, I really appreciate that you're coming to us early, and not creating a real false sense of urgency for us. But I'll also commit to you that we won't let it drag on just for the sake of dragging on. We'll certainly be able to act one way or the other in a quick and decisive manner, and really help give you some certainty. So
yeah, I really appreciate that. Like I said, there isn't really we're looking pretty good on time, but I do appreciate that sentiment.
Yeah. Will or Bill or Michaela?
Are you looking for comment now, Brian, or are you still?
Yeah, it's a general discussion. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess so. I just wanted to say that these opportunities, while it feels like we've had several in the past years, prior to that, I don't think we had much affordable housing getting built in town. And so I think it would be a real shame to let an opportunity like this go by without making a strong case for it. I think that while we've done a lot of senior housing in recent years, and there might be some fatigue in that, there's also a very strong need for workforce housing and low income housing for families. I think that the location of this and the usage of that site, this seems like a terrific use of that lot. And from an economics perspective, I don't know what would go there and I'm assuming that others will do this analysis, but what else could be put there that would generate revenue for the town of 25% of the value of the home services on these things? And again, I'm assuming that analysis is also going to be done. From an ROI perspective, it feels like this is a win for the town, even with the TIF. But I'm assuming that the council and the finance committee will be looking at that closely. But in general, I'm for one still very much favorable, especially given the balance in the funding of the account, which still gives us room to look at a couple more projects just based on what we have in the bank.
Thanks, Will. Dick, how about you? Any thoughts you'd like to share?
Not right. Well, not really. I mean, I'm still listening. I'm reading the letter here, and I get one question I have is that the TIF of the CEA, is that specifically for your project, Nate, or is that for the whole project?
Just for our building.
Okay. And wasn't somebody last time I was listening to this, they were going to put some numbers together as far as taxes and what we're presently collecting for taxes on that piece of property and what future taxes would be? I thought that was.
We did get a lot of that information, Dick. It is online because it was all in our agenda packet. I kind of was thinking of this like that you guys might have been interested in seeing that whole agenda packet, that I could email it out to everyone. But if you go to the finance committee I'm happy to email it if that's easier, although I don't have a group for a group for you guys email, but it's right on the finance committee agenda. You click it and there's a lot of good information in there. Tom and staff put together a whole lot of information about CEAs we already have in town. I think you'll all find it quite interesting. So I would definitely recommend. It's all in the packet.
I'll circulate that before I go home tonight. So you'll
Okay,
have that.
thank you, Tom. Thanks.
Yep.
Great. Thanks a lot, Tom.
Yeah, thank you, Betsy, for
Great. Thanks, Dick.
Yeah.
Michaela, any thoughts or questions you'd like to share?
No, I mean, thinking about the location itself, I think there's not a lot of other best uses. I think that is a prime location for it, and I think it looks like a really promising presentation there.
Thanks. They keep scrolling here. All right, Bill, over on page 3.
I to be brief, I certainly agree with Will Rowan's comments. Michaela's point, I think, is a very good point. It seems to me that what you're doing with this site is you're getting a rather complete build out. So when your tax revenue is going to be 25% of the value of that building, it's a substantial number of units. It's the gold standard of housing from a municipal fiscal responsibility point of view. You're talking about seniors, and you're providing for affordable housing, which means these are people who are on Social Security, making $25,000 to $50,000 is their annual income. So it's the perfect, as Michaela said, it's the perfect location for it. So I strongly support it. I guess I'd have a question to Nate. Is there any other source? 200, we've got, roughly 450,000 left, 200 of which would go to this project, leaving us with a little over 200 with the Piper Shores money coming in. And do you have an alternative source if we were to say 100,000?
We would do whatever it took. We always do whatever it takes to fill the gap. Obviously, the 200,000 is better than 100,000, but we have a long track record of hunting down any and all sources. I will say that we're going to have a pending application to the Federal Home Loan Bank of Boston in the summer with award in the December, but that's already been priced into, or that's already been factored into my model. So in short, Bill, the 200 to 100, it probably isn't a deal killer. I'll try to find the money elsewhere, but the 200 is a certainty, whereas 100,000, just means we have to scramble for something a bit more. And one more point, Bill, not on the money, but on what you just said is so true regarding our targeted population. So all of these units are affordable, 60% of area median income, which in this case is $42,000 for a household of one. So like you said, people living off of Social Security, that's what the demographic is, seniors looking to downsize.
And honestly, my perception on this is I'm the last person who would be charged with being cheap. It's the leveraging that Tom talked about, because the more of these we can do, the better off this community is to have this sort of housing provided.
Could I ask a follow-up on that? Nate, would that hurt the score if
that's yes. I was just thinking about that. That's another good point. So the 200,000, not a deal breaker in terms of 200 to 100, not a deal breaker in terms of financially, but when you're at 100,000, then your below market capital is actually less than 100,000 in Maine Housing from Maine Housing's perspective, because when they do the analysis, below market capital, they discount it 30 years, so that's actually about 78,000, 72,000, something like that. So 100,000, it would need to be at least like 130 to 140,000 in order for the discount to be 100,000 or more, because the minimum award they value is $100,000.
Okay.
But like I said, it's not present money, it's future money.
You'd need 150,000 to get the points.
Right.
Yeah. Great.
Brian,
terrific.
sorry. I know I'm
Yeah.
probably on a different screen. This is Eric.
Yeah, I was going to go to you next, Eric. So go ahead.
I want to channel my inner Marge here since she's not here, but I think her point is always the leverage point. We're talking about $200,000 to get 31 units of affordable housing. That's less than $6,500 per unit. So it feels like a pretty good use of our funds here.
Yeah. Very true.
Yeah.
I have one more question, Nate. You said that the TIF or the CEA is for 20 years, right?
Mhm.
What
Yeah.
happens after the 20? Does it go
So,
to value?
and this is a question we always get from Maine Housing. So at year 20, we have our AHP financing is typically a 20-year term with a 30-year amortization schedule. So in year 20, we're going to be refinancing anyways, and it'll be a smaller principal amount with probably a lower monthly payment.
Okay. Thank you.
And then, Nate, at that point, though, you would be expected to pay full taxes at the end of that 20 years, though.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's what we're hoping is the differential between the payment and the taxes. Yeah. Evens out.
And that allows you to stay affordable at the property.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah. The
Great.
affordability is for 40. The affordability is locked in. Maine Housing locks you in for 45 years.
So Brian, do you mind if I ask one more quick question?
You're the one I was going to go to next, Betsy.
Nate
You're
said?
figuring out my rhythm here. This is good.
So maybe you don't want to speak for the developer, Nate, but obviously this was workforce housing market rate. Not market rate. Market rate for workforce is supposed to be affordable, but not taxpayer funded. So, but you said that the developer said, I know he's on the line listening, that the building, he would make the building taller if this were workforce housing. Can you just?
No, I think if it was market rate housing, I think they would have made it 1 floor taller for the required parking.
And how tall is yours?
That's what I remember. 3 stories. So let me see if I can get the feet for you.
That's a good question.
The reason for
29
the
feet. It's 29 feet.
the reason for the extra height would be to have some parking on the ground floor.
Yep.
It's essentially an extra story for purposes of maximizing parking.
Okay, so at the workforce, they were going to park underneath because they'd have more people who needed parking. I gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay,
Right.
great.
Yeah.
So you have the 29 feet, Nate?
Market would be 45 feet. Jack, just let me know.
All right, so I'm gonna pop over to Will real quick, and then just want to be conscious of the time and the couple more things that we want to get through on the agenda. And so, Will, why don't we go to you and then take a quick survey around the room, see if anybody has anything pressing, and then we can just circle up on follow-ups, Nate, before we move on. Will, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, thank you. Nate, I wonder if you could speak to some of the waiting lists at your other properties that Avesta manages, specifically those. I know I believe Southgate is Avesta. I wonder if you could speak to that. You may not have that information, but also some of the other affordable senior housing, just to kind of gauge kind of what the need is.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't have Southgate's in front of me, although that is a different demographic, as you say. I have a good example actually from a project we just got certificate of occupancy for on 977 Brighton. So the building siding wasn't even up yet, and we had already gotten 400 inquiries for 40 units. Granted, we haven't even marketed this yet. This was just for people driving by and inquiring. Not all these people are going to qualify, but a portion of them will. And it just shows you the need for affordable housing. Before we even tell people they qualify, they're asking us, can I move in? That's just one example I have, but that is something that the finance committee asked for as well. And so I have it on my follow-up list.
Perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Great. I'm going to just scan around my my iPhone room here. And Michaela, anything pressing that you want to get out now?
Nope.
Great.
I'm good. Thank you.
Dick, how about you?
I'm grand. I'm good.
Great. Eric?
I'm good too. Thank you.
All right. We scan over here. Will, anything more from you?
No, thank you, Brian.
All right. And Bill?
I'm good.
All right. And Betsy, what's your superlative?
All set.
All right. Terrific. Well, great. That was a great conversation, Dan. I really appreciate your presentation and your work, and thanks for coming to Scarborough with your proposal.
Absolutely.
It's
So
great to get more.
Oh, absolutely. So just to make sure I have my follow-up items right. I mean, it's the same list as Finance Committee, but performas, parking data, market data, and then wait lists.
Yeah. And let me quickly survey the room and see if there's anybody looking for any more data points that would influence their support for the project. Will, let me just quickly look to you. You want to give me a thumbs up or good? Bill, anything else that'd be important to you? All right.
No.
And then Michaela and Dick, Eric. All right, great. Yeah, so I think when it comes to time for us in our next meeting to talk about writing us our work, we're really going to be looking at this in terms of do we support this as meeting an identified need for housing low income people in Scarborough, and does it seem like it's a proposal that speaks well and represents a good exercise of affordable housing in our community. So you've done a great job presenting, and
Thank you.
I think you can read the body language from the committee. I think it's a couple of extra data points. I think we'll be able to get a good support letter.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Great. Well, thank you, Nate.
Good night.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Nate.
Bye.
You too. Great. Well, that's exciting. One of the things that strikes me is, if you think back to the 70s, which was when there was this huge boom of affordable housing in the country, things really come in spurts. And Will, you kind of spoke to it, that it may feel like there's a lot getting done now, but we ought not cause that to temper what we're because for these huge droughts, end up let's make hay while the sun is shining, as the farmers say, right?
Yeah.
So well, great. Well, thanks everybody. The next item on the agenda is the quick closing the loop discussion, and Tom, I'm going to pass it to you regarding the home that's the first home to be resold over in the Downs, the first affordable home to be resold. And you want to just give a quick update on that, Tom?
Yeah, I want to do my best to respect confidentiality of kind of all the parties involved, but I appreciate all of your input. The last time you convened, I did submit or sent a so-called notice of determination based on that discussion, which essentially accomplished two tasks. One was to advise what the total maximum household income is for a qualified buyer, and that, I'll just remind you, was $78,500 in this case. And secondarily, what was the maximum, I want to get the terminology right here, maximum sales price. And we determined that was $290,000. I have met back with the homeowner. There was a open house held over the weekend, offers accepted, sometime after that. And they have presented me with a preferred offer. And I will say it is coming in higher than the maximum sales price, but I think we appreciated that was a possibility. So I've looked back through the covenant, or the agreement rather, and I've asked her, and she's actually provided it to me, another notice, official notice to the town. And that notice is essentially her intention of entering into a purchase and sale agreement. So I'll be evaluating all the terms of that and communicating with her by the end of the week. I'm sensitive to the fact that real estate deals are time sensitive. And frankly, I guess two things I can say emphatically, because I've seen the tax returns. The qualified buyer is in fact qualified. Her income is below the 78.5, so good news. And then based on my initial calculations, because now we have the benefit of seeing all the particulars of her financing costs, her down payment, we had a pretty good sense already of other housing related costs. And so it seems pretty clearly that this qualified buyer, the terms of the sale are such that this home is affordable to her. Said another way, her total housing costs will be less than 30% of her income. So given all of that, I believe I'll be in a position as soon as tomorrow to essentially approve the terms of this, and they will enter into a formal purchase and sale agreement. And I expect and hope for their sake that the deal will go through. There is financing associated, so I'm sure there'll be appraisals, and we'll have to see whether all of those underwriting requirements work out for them. I will say that this exercise, not surprisingly, has pointed out some weaknesses in our affordable housing agreement that I'd like to use this maybe in the rearview mirror a bit to go back through that document and tighten some things up or clarify some things. It seems pretty clearly that we need to have a little more clarity around. I think we actually have a pretty good system of identifying the maximum income for the household. I think we need some better clarity on the sale price, and then also the final sales price, if you will.
Yeah, so, Tom, do you have a sense of when the sale will take place with this contract?
The purchase,
Yeah, if everything goes, ballpark. I mean, without
April 30th, they are to close.
So once that is behind us and it's not pending, I think that'd be a good time for this group to get back together and pick your brain and others who are involved to talk through what would have been nice to be different, right? What would have made things smoother? What was confusing? What wasn't? What worked well? And really maybe even set aside a dedicated meeting to just focusing on this. Presumably there's a decent number of homes that exist already that will someday sell again, and it'd be nice to have a smooth process. And certainly there will be more that are built that it'd be nice to document a good process.
Yeah, and it's taken me some time to kind of appreciate these factors, but of course this sale is occurring in an almost unprecedented red hot market, and so there's really kind of pressures and factors that are coming to play in this deal that I can't say won't happen again, but I think they are kind of influencing things in a really irregular way. But having said that, where I keep coming back to is what are the fundamental objectives of this program? It's to make sure that the person buying the home, it's affordable to them. And essentially they're getting into a home that they could not get into otherwise, but for this program. And so I'm feeling good that this deal as it's presented meets those most basic and important policy objectives.
Yeah. Tom, I want to ask you and maybe ask the rest of the group, something a little on the softer side of things. I don't know how often these things will sell, but it strikes me that this is part of an inventory of housing that we care a lot about and really ties to our mission. Do folks have feelings about the value of doing anything formal? I don't know whether it's a letter or baking cookies or who knows what to welcome a new buyer into one of the homes that's restricted by these covenants in a formal way on behalf of the Alliance, in sort of a light ceremonial, not a public ceremony, but creating some sort of formal welcoming ritual, if you will, for folks who are buying this inventory of housing.
And there's some business that can be transacted in a soft kind of way there. You know, case in point, this homeowner, like most will be, are first-time home buyers. That's daunting enough. And then you layer in these complications. So, you know, there are annual reporting requirements that I'm not sure if everyone is even aware of. So I think in doing so, Brian, we could have a great opportunity to introduce ourselves, make them aware that we're here to support, but there's also some ongoing responsibilities for them.
I think I'd be more in favor of a formal and friendly letter. I don't think that bringing cookies over with a bunch of us to somebody's house is necessarily in order, but certainly maybe that's just more my personality that's being reflected there.
Yeah.
But you're much friendlier than I am, Brian.
Yeah. Well, no, I mean, I just think of this as like a pretty big deal, right? Like, you know, this is Tom has said it a couple of times. I don't know if it's all been tonight, but these are homes that people are buying that, you know, but for this program, they probably wouldn't be able to. And yeah, and this group is a big part of that. And it's kind of if that's something that this group wants to, you know, regularly celebrate, that'd be kind of neat.
I think with the homeowners themselves,
but if not, you know, a letter.
Brian, I think the idea behind affordable housing is everyone wants to feel the same and get into the, you know, the ability to have as nice a home as possible. So I kind of agree with Will, you know, the formal introduction, making sure people know the obligations, and then, you know, maybe I don't want to use the word celebration, but maybe the acknowledgement is, you know, I'd love to see more of a master plan of what we're doing. I would be real honest, this program confuses me a little bit, and that's on me. I'm not saying that because you guys have not done a good job on it, but I'm just learning about it. And so, you know, if I'm not married, I mean, if I understand it, if I'm not married and I qualify for the house, and then I get married and I married lucky and I just doubled my income, then there's nothing I have to do, right? I don't pay into a fund or anything like that. It's just qualifying at the time. So I'm just trying to understand it better and see if we're, you know, meeting the mission. It's very interesting because as opposed to these, you know, hours and hours where these developers have to come, you know, we're just basically saying, hey, you know, we're going to keep we're going to keep some houses affordable, you know, so it's not a criticism in the least. I'm just trying to understand it as one tool in the tool arsenal that we're looking at and how it works. Yeah. If there could be a way to make it work better, but I don't know. If I was in the program, I think I would be trying to feel like I did accomplish. You know, I'm just a normal home buyer. I just happen to get a special home. I don't know. That's just me. I kind of agree with Will.
Yeah.
I think, like, instead of going with baked goods and all that stuff, just I like the idea, Brian, but just a phone call, 5-minute phone call, welcome, telling them you're going to be getting a packet in the mail. Please read it. If you have any questions, give us a call. We're here to help you, blah, blah, blah. So.
I will tell you, I was not prepared. I had a sense of it, but the sort of calls I was fielding, frankly, over the weekend, even, again, given a very brisk market, you know, tough enough talking to the listing broker and the homeowner, but now I'm fielding calls from all brokers who are representing buyers, direct calls from buyers, and the level of understanding and complexity, frankly, of this, you know, has really been challenging. And I don't know that there's any, you know, magic pill for that, but it was an eye opener for me, and we can expect it's going to happen again. So to the extent that we can tighten up our system, and that might even be just kind of a, you know, procedures and protocols that we communicate out that in the event of sale, this is how we're going to conduct ourselves. So there's some consistency and universal understanding would go a long way. So I'd love to have this conversation with a little time and distance from this deal.
Definitely. Well, and Tom and Will, I do see your hand. So I'll call you in a minute. But Tom, you put in a lot of work, you know, both in putting this whole thing together, but also getting this sale to where it is. And I want to appreciate you for that.
Sure.
You know, thanks for all the time that you put into
Yeah,
Thank you, Tom.
yep.
Yeah, seriously, thank you, Tom.
I didn't have a choice, but you're welcome.
Well, Ron, go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, so Betsy raised a really interesting point. It's something that I'm also a little bit uncomfortable with, and it goes against the spirit of what Tom just said about making the program simpler. But I just, as part of that conversation, I'd also like to explore like household size, and and to Betsy's point around the income level, expanding. I believe we addressed that in the rental properties, but in the ownership, it was more challenging. But I could be misremembering that.
Yeah, I think you're right, Will. And I'll parse this in a way that maybe is a little bit typical of me, and just say that there's kind of two issues at play here. One is, how does this home buying program work? And it's a home buying program based on the ordinance that we have. And then the other is, what does the ordinance say about affordability? And those are two different questions that you have two very long conversations to them. And I think our immediate need is to tune up our program that ties with the existing ordinance, and then if we can do that in a way that is flexible enough to work with future ordinances, and maybe then we can fine tune an ordinance, or make recommendations anyways to fine tune an ordinance, which I think is where some of those issues that you and Betsy are talking about might get explored.
Yep.
Eric, you had your hand up.
I did, Tom, thank you, but I realized that what I had to say wasn't unique to what Will and Brian were saying, so.
Yeah,
It never stops me. So.
Okay, go for it, Eric.
I think the home ownership is complex, and there's no doubt about it. And you've heard me say, from a Vesta's perspective, we have a condo association on Munjoy Hill that we've probably been through 4 resales in the last 2 years, and each of them are complex, and each of them are unique, and each of them require significant amount of education for all parties involved, as you've just described, Tom.
Yep.
And so I think it's the nature of the beast, unfortunately. Now, to the extent that we can create procedures and policies around it to help guide it a bit, that could be then distributed and shared, may get us somewhere, but there are still a lot of people who aren't going to read it.
The one thing that I've come back to that's given me comfort on this one, and I think going forward, is that at the time of sale, if that if this unit is truly affordable, once all the unique circumstance in terms of that deal are known, there's comfort to me that in this. I mean, we can tie ourselves in knots, getting way too complicated. I mean, even the way we have it structured, and I would tend to agree that it feels a little too loose in areas, is complicated. So I invite the conversation, and I'll be pleased to share my experiences with you.
Great. Thanks, Tom. All right, let's see. Michaela, anything from you on this?
Gosh, I could talk a long time about that whole. I guess I don't know. It sounds interesting, the idea of having another kind of meeting to talk more about this process. Obviously, kind of once this is behind, and not necessarily specifically about this deal, but just kind of how you could better improve maybe the language and the process of going about the whole sale of this. I mean, there's 3 homes, I think, in Gristmill, and there are a few condos over there too. And I'm sure that at some point, it's going to come up again that we've got another resale there. So not only having kind of an easy process for people to not be turned off to the whole idea to this affordable housing, I think having a good experience is beneficial for kind of the buyer, the seller, the whole overall deal of it, if that makes sense. So
Mikhail, just to be clear, I know the buyer's broker is in your agency. Were you involved in the particulars of this deal?
I was not, no.
Okay.
Mm-mm.
Dick, anything from you?
I think another meeting would be really beneficial for all of us. And, will help Tom too. I mean, give him a nice roadmap that he can use to, maneuver through this whole process again. And his ideas would be, very important for us to know. And I'm for it.
Great.
Good, thank you.
Thanks. Eric? Thoughts?
I'm all set.
All right, we'll go to the next screen. Will?
I'll hold my comments for that discussion. I look forward to it.
All right, great. Bill? Oh, you're muted, Bill. You're muted.
When Brian made the suggestion of a gift, what immediately came to mind was the scene from It's a Wonderful Life, where George Bailey goes to the home of this Italian immigrant who got their house in Potter's Field, and it was their first house. So you would be the new George Bailey of the
Red wine, salt.
Perfect.
I think we can probably improve on that. I don't think we need to show up in a 1930s Ford. I think we can probably send them a nice message and maybe a gift or something.
Yeah. All right.
I think, Brian, I think you look more like Clarence than you do George Bailey, but that's just me.
Fair enough. All right. How do I mute people on this thing? Yeah.
I have that power.
Jeez. Oh, great. All right, Betsy, anything to share on this? Good. All right. Great. We just see what else we've got on the agenda. So we, next on the agenda, it's standard documents for future resales, which I think kind of fits under the umbrella of doing a postmortem on this sale with the idea of really creating a standardized roadmap now that we've got a little bit of experience. So unless anybody objects, I want to just zip through that without much more discussion, with the idea of doing all that discussion later. Same thing with the next item, annual certification or reminder of covenants to the existing owners. Tom, are you comfortable that maybe that could all fit within the umbrella of
Yes. Yeah, it's all related. Yep.
Yeah, okay. Developing relationships with town councilors is the next item on the agenda. And this is an item which early on we were talking about the importance of this committee not acting in isolation. And we're fortunate to have a liaison in Betsy, and and as we work, we're from time to time going to be asked for letters of support for things. Sometimes we will be, for lack of a better phrase, testifying or presenting in front of town council. And when this item initially got on the agenda, several months ago, I think the spirit of it was, if the only person behind that table who knows who we are is our liaison, it kind of hurts our message. And so there's value in each of us as alliance members, spending some time, getting to know town councilors and sharing our perspective and our experience and the value that we have in affordable housing, building that personal connection and frankly, so that the only time that people are hearing about affordable housing is not when we're up in front of town council asking for something, but when we're seeing people at the grocery store or when we're just interacting with them. And so that's really what this item on the agenda is about. And we've also got two former town councilors on on the alliance who could probably speak to, the value of, relationships with folks, and, just, how that, can raise awareness of certain issues. So, with that, I'll just kind of, open up maybe just for a couple minutes of discussion around, the value of moving forward with, I don't know if it's some sort of, formal effort here, but just an awareness from us all of doing some kind of outreach.
So really quick, Brian, if you don't mind, I'll jump in here because those are all great points, but I only am jumping in the middle because I had this thought tonight when we were in this meeting, because the presentation from Nate going to the finance committee, that was also new. And then my thought tonight was almost like we probably could add a joint meeting, finance and housing alliance, because we covered a lot of the same territory, but that would kind of give some of that overlap if this is something we continue in the future. So I have a lot of interest in the council, starting to look at, a master plan and understanding. Councilor Clucci tonight, so he's been trying to figure out the denominator of the 10%, and who knows? He came up with a number, so it's good. I mean, he's worked on it. So I think there is some, synergy there between, the long-term planning, master plan, what we're really trying to do, inventories in town and what we have. And then on a specific one, like, again, I was just sitting here tonight thinking, oh, I bet they would have liked to have seen, this and this, a few extra things that we saw tonight that you guys might have liked to have seen. So if this goes forward in the future where the finance committee takes it on, I think we should consider maybe a joint finance HSA meeting. It could be helpful.
Great. Well, thanks, Betsy.
Yeah, I like that idea. That's a good idea. That's a good thought.
Bill?
A really valuable element of communication is that in every town council meeting, the liaison representative gets the opportunity to report on what the committee is doing. And that's the best way that the other 6 council members have the opportunity to understand what's going on. And I mean, I always listen very carefully to those reports because there was no other way to stay in touch with the important business that was being done at the committee level. So we've got our emissary and Betsy to be able to convey how hard I think we are working to try and represent the best interests of this community. And so I'm satisfied that that's an effective way for us to be communicating.
I think that's a great point. And I think it goes to the larger point that you made tonight, Brian, where you said to Nate, it stood out to me, thank you we're ahead of the curve here. So I think, again, like defining this process a little better. When do you guys hear it? Do we hear it? Do we not hear it? Do we have a joint? When's it go to council? I mean, so we did a fair amount of work on the CA process for economic development, and we tried to use that, and we knew it wasn't perfect for affordable housing. So, I think there is work to do for an affordable housing policy TIF. It's been on the plate. I think Tom and all of us have talked about it. It's just the plate's pretty full, but
yeah,
it might be something that you guys help us take up. I think there's actually part of a process that RFP that you guys have some features of that in that. And then in our call, Nate actually mentioned that Portland's done a few things now that where they're actually looking at your chance for getting the score that you're going for, because before they give out $200,000, they want to know, what's your chance. Now you guys took care of it last time by saying if you don't get approved, you don't get the money. So I think you took care of that. But anyway, I think there's work to be done there. And then, sometimes if I report back to council on some stuff, you guys, at least on Jocelyn, like you heard it after we did, it's like, well, hey, now the Housing Alliance heard Jocelyn, so I mean, we kind of got to get that worked out. So it's nobody's fault. These are kind of new, but I think there's a process to be had there that will tie us all together better.
Yeah, I think that's great. great, Betsy. And you know, I keep going, you know, back. Someday we'll all go to grocery stores a lot and see each other a lot more. Yeah, but imagine if a town councilor hears your report about what we're doing and then sees one of us, you know, at Shaw's or Hannaford or wherever any of us shop, and you know, makes that connection to be able to ask us in the produce aisle about that thing that you were talking about. Yeah, how great would that be? You know, it really bringing what we're doing to the forefront. And you know, I'll mention that it's top of mind to me from some history of this group that we act as you know, kind of the housing arm of town council. So you know, when town council has a curiosity about housing, you know, we're the one that can act on that curiosity. And so, you know, we, you know, sort of are standing by, you know, waiting in a way to, you know, to act and inquire and to do, you know, some of the studying on behalf of town council.
Okay, great. So it's two-way street. Thank you.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Will.
So yeah, Brian, I just wanted to say that that I think the sentiment that put this item on the agenda is really valid in terms of, like, it's important to build those relationships and so that we can have that conduit. Even if there's a formal mechanism, I think the informal mechanism is equally important. I don't know if we can formalize the informal connections, but just to encourage my fellow committee members that it's, you know, developing and reaching out is individually to the town council members is really important, especially around when issues like this come up for things that we really support. Like, it's one thing to have a formal letter from the committee, and it's another thing to reach out to you know, Jean Marie and say, hey, this is something that's really important, and here's why I think that, and et cetera.
Yeah. Well, that's great. Let me go back to screen one here. Michaela, Eric, or Dick, any thoughts on this?
Oh, I'm good.
Great. All right. Yeah, and you know, I think the final thought that I do have on this is, you know, each counselor, I think, tends to have maybe a few pet issues of theirs. You know, some might be social issues, some might be economic issues. And I think it's really important as we think about, you know, developing and cultivating and just growing our own relationships that we don't only focus on the folks that we can tell are already about affordable housing. You know, that we, you know, really branch out to, you know, folks who, you know, we might not be sure how much they know about or are in tune with the issues that we care about. And I say that because, you know, I've done a little bit of that in the past, and have been really wonderfully, positively, you know, joyfully surprised and had some great conversations with counselors, past and present, and just to find out about the support that they do have for the work we do. So it's been really reassuring. All right, let me see what's next. Yeah, so the next thing under new business is this interest rate discussion, which, Tom, I think that also probably the whole process around the Amexis and whatnot. I'm looking at the clock here. It's 7:47. We're a very good, solid chunk of time into this meeting. We've got a lot of old business, none of it that I think merits a quick discussion.
No.
And unless there's wild objection from anybody in the room, I'm going to suggest that we pass over that old business and just keep it tabled for now.
Yeah, Brian, I'd like to.
Is there anything urgent on the old business?
No, I'd like to work with you. Marge really wanted to make sure we carried these things so we didn't forget about them. But I don't think she really ever intended this to be kind of discussion items each of your meetings. So maybe you and I can work about how to characterize these differently. I do
Oh,
want to
good.
add,
Yeah, that's a great idea.
I do want to add public comment on as a, a standing item on your agenda as well.
Mm.
Oh, great. Yep. Yeah, so Tom, before we get to public comment, let me just go around the room one more time here, see if folks have anything they want to add for discussion. Let me go to screen one, and Michaela, Eric, and Dick. Anything from any of you? All right. Screen two, Bill and Will.
No,
All
I'm all
right.
set.
And Betsy on screen three. Anything from you before we go public?
I've been talking about HSAs, so I've had HSAs on the brain, but you are SHA, so I will try to get that right. Although I don't know why you have the word Scarborough in your title and none of our other committees do, so that's like driving me crazy because I look for you under H alphabetically. Oh, they're under S. You know, we are all Scarborough committees. So anyway, and then I know I dropped an email to Liam and Tom today, and you guys are going to work on this. But the old business had goals and objectives, and Tom was like, well, I'm not sure what it is. So if there is an agenda item that ever comes up that talks about that, if you could point us into the committee members into the direction of what's out there to look at, that would be great. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Betsy. Tom, do you want to flip it over to see if there's anybody watching who for public comment?
Undoubtedly, we have scores of people on YouTube, but sadly, no one present for public comment.
No. All right. All right. I'm sure we'll be trending in no time. So great. Well, if any of our members want to make any sort of
I
motion to
move to
adjourn,
adjourn.
is there a second?
I get it.
Wonderful. All in favor?
Aye.
Great.
Right.
Thank you
All
all.
right, wonderful. Well, thanks everybody.
Thanks, Brian. Thanks.
Great seeing you all, and stay healthy and safe.
Same to you.
Good night,
Bye-bye.
Good night, Clarence.